It all started with a bag of stale pretzels and a serious case of mistaken identity. I was sitting in the park, minding my own business, scrolling through job listings and wondering if freelance sandwich consultant was a real career, when an older woman in yoga pants and a Bluetooth headset jogged up to me, shoved 3 leashes into my hand, and said, "Thank you so much for filling in. Riley's instructions are in the bag, and Baguette doesn't like eye contact." Then she jogged off without waiting for a reply. The pretzels dropped to the grass. I looked down. 3 dogs. One of them wearing a tiny cable knit sweater. All of them staring at me like I was supposed to have a plan. I glanced around the park. No cameras. No crew jumping out to say this was a prank show. Just me, 3 dogs, and a canvas bag with a laminated sheet titled, "Walk Route, Baguette, Sparky, and Muffin." I had 2 choices. Chase the woman down and explain that I was not, in fact, her dog walker. Pretend I was the dog walker because honestly, I needed the distraction and I was wearing sneakers anyway. Obviously, I chose chaos. The laminated sheet was absurdly detailed. Baguette, the sweater-wearing poodle, only walked counterclockwise around the fountain. Sparky, a jittery chihuahua, needed to pee every 11 minutes exactly. Muffin, the bulldog, was apparently prone to spontaneous rolling. We were 20 minutes in, and I was already feeling confident, too confident. I had settled into a nice rhythm of leash sorting and poop bag heroism when Baguette suddenly yanked hard to the left and took off. Just bolted. Now, Baguette was tiny. Could fit in a teapot tiny. But fast. I dropped the other 2 leashes out of instinct and chased after the sweatered blur like my rent depended on it. Spoiler, it kinda did. Because within seconds, I heard shouting. Not just any shouting. Angry, official, someone with a walkie kind of shouting. And then I heard the name. Baguette. Stop that dog. That's the mayor's poodle. I stopped running. My brain did a full cartoon double take. I looked down at the leash in my hand. Empty. I had just lost the mayor's poodle. And I wasn't even a real dog walker. I did what any responsible, upstanding, totally fake dog walker would do. I panicked silently and then ran faster. Baguette was now a woolen blur weaving through a crowd of unsuspecting joggers like a furry missile of municipal doom. I sprinted past a toddler's birthday party, nearly plowed through a man doing Tai Chi, and dove between 2 teens filming a dance video. Sorry, mayor's dog, emergency. Which, by the way, gets people's attention real fast. I spotted a flash of cable knit near the duck pond and launched myself forward with what I can only describe as Olympic desperation. My fingers grazed the leash, missed, and I face-planted into the grass, eating approximately 1 pound of duck-adjacent dirt. By the time I rolled over, Baguette had vanished again. People were staring. I heard someone say, "Is that the guy from the dog food commercial?" And I didn't have time to correct them. I scrambled to my feet just as the older woman from before came sprinting into view. "Oh no, where's Baguette?" she gasped, clutching her pearls, actual pearls. I hesitated for half a beat too long. She temporarily de-leashed herself. "She what?" "Bolted," I said, catching my breath. "But I'm on it." That's when she pulled out a phone and tapped something on the screen. Great. She was calling the mayor. "Security is already on it," she said breathlessly. "This is a code biscuit. We haven't had one since the yoga mat incident of 2019. "I'm sorry, code what?" But she wasn't listening anymore. She turned to the sky and started waving her arms. Seconds later, a drone buzzed overhead. "A drone. That's Biscuit 1, she muttered. "It's tracking her thermal signature." I wanted to lie down and let the earth absorb me. But instead, I turned and saw Muffin and Sparky standing patiently next to a hot dog cart, licking spilled ketchup off the sidewalk like this was all totally normal. I grabbed their leashes and ran. Minutes ticked by. I jogged up the hill, down the trail, past 3 identical joggers in neon shirts who all shouted, "Dog emergency," like it was the new 5K theme. Then, finally, I saw her. Baguette, standing in the middle of a sandbox, surrounded by children, wearing a princess crown, and the mayor, standing beside her, arms crossed, frown in place. I had one chance to fix this. And then I sneezed. Loud. Startled the poodle. And she bolted. Again. This time, Baguette didn't run through the park. She ran out of it, across the street, through a hedge, and into what appeared to be a farmer's market. I heard screaming. I heard someone yell, "Who let the rat loose?" And then came the most unexpected sound of all. A bell. A bicycle bell. I turned just in time to see a man on a vintage bike, complete with wicker basket and Baguette, the bread, not the dog, suddenly swerve as our poodle-shaped chaos tornado darted beneath his front wheel. He screeched to a halt, somehow stayed upright, and muttered, "I've had dreams like this." "Me too, bike guy. Me too." Baguette zigzagged between stalls, knocking over apples, spooking a goat from the petting zoo section. Why was there a goat? And causing a small child to scream with joy. It's a magic dog. I finally cornered her near a honey stand. Her little sweater had snagged on a basket of beeswax candles, and she was frozen, not from fear, but from what I can only describe as haughty inconvenience. As I approached, she lifted one paw with the regality of a queen who has been improperly seated at a gala. I scooped her up gently, murmuring, "Please don't have diplomatic immunity." And that's when someone clapped. A smattering at first, then more. I turned, and there they were, the mayor, the pearl-clutching assistant, several bystanders, and inexplicably, a mime. All applauding. The mayor walked up to me, expression unreadable. "You tackled a foreign object to save the pride of our administration." "Foreign object?" I asked. "The goat," he said, gesturing behind him. I looked. Sure enough, Muffin had somehow corralled the goat and was now sitting proudly beside it like a security guard posing for a calendar. The mayor nodded solemnly. "You're not the dog walker we expected, but you're the one we needed." He pulled out a tiny pin. It was shaped like a paw. He pinned it to my jacket. I stood there, holding Baguette, feeling like I had won a very weird version of the Hunger Games. And then the assistant leaned in and whispered, "You're still on the clock. The 3:15 poop is not optional." So there I was, honorary paw-pin citizen, clutching the mayor's freshly crowned poodle, while Sparky attempted to chew through his own leash and Muffin sat proudly beside a goat like she'd been training for this moment her entire life. I couldn't leave now. Not without finishing the job. Or at least surviving it. Walk route resumes past the community garden, the Pearl lady informed me, pulling out a walkie-talkie. "Tell Biscuit 1 to fall back. Code Biscuit is now code nap time." "Copy that," said someone on the other end. I wasn't sure what disturbed me more, the fact that this system existed, or the fact that everyone seemed to know it worked. We resumed the walk. Sparky peed on command. Muffin flopped onto her back in front of the community bulletin board, blocking 3 yoga flyers and a lost iguana poster. Baguette, meanwhile, strutted like nothing had happened, the tiny crown still somehow affixed to her head. At one point, someone leaned out of a bakery doorway and handed me a croissant. "You're doing the Lord's work," he said solemnly. I didn't question it. I just nodded and kept walking. I made it back to the original bench around 3:40 p.m., sweaty, tangled in leashes, and questioning my life decisions. That's when the original dog walker, Riley, I assumed, finally showed up. She skidded to a stop in front of me, looked me up and down, and said, "Wait, you're not me." "No," I agreed, "but I have acquired several of your responsibilities and at least one new allergy." She blinked. Did you get paw-pinned?" I nodded, holding it up like a badge. She stared at the dogs, clean, tired, perfectly intact, then at me. "You're hired," she said. "What?" "My cousin's quitting." "You want the job?" "Pays in cash, snacks, and people's admiration." I blinked. "I was actually just here with pretzels." "You want to make those pretzels tax-deductible?" I looked down at the dogs. Baguette sneezed. Muffin rolled. "Sparky." "Well?" Sparky peed. Again. I sighed. "When do I start?" Riley grinned. "Tomorrow, 8 a.m. Bring plastic bags and a sense of humor." I was about to ask if there was a dress code when the goat trotted by again, completely unleashed, and winked. I'm not sure if that last part really happened, but it felt on brand. The next morning, I showed up at exactly 7:55 a.m. wearing my most respectable hoodie and a belt bag full of dog treats I borrowed from my neighbor, who runs a Shih Tzu influencer account. Don't ask. I had no idea if I was really hired or if Riley had just handed off a fever dream with a leash, but I was committed. Mostly because I still hadn't recovered from the adrenaline high of being applauded by the mayor. Riley was waiting with 4 dogs this time. 4. One of them was a Great Dane named Sprinkles who immediately stepped on my foot and sneezed in my face. "Welcome to the pack," she said, tossing me 2 leashes like we were in a buddy cop movie. For the first 30 minutes, things went surprisingly well. I had 2 dogs. I had a route. I even had a friendly nod from Biscuit 1 overhead, which, yes, was still following us. Apparently, the mayor had safety extended the drone patrol. Then we hit the fountain, and chaos returned like an old friend. A kid launched a frisbee. A squirrel made a daring leap across a trash can. And Muffin, who had returned for her second shift, decided she was a border collie and herded 3 joggers into a bush. I apologized. Repeatedly. Offered dog treats. One guy asked for my business card. That's when I saw him. A tall guy in a suit. Watching me. Not judging, more like studying. He stepped forward and said, "You handled that well." "Thanks. I specialize in chaos and deeply misbehaving small mammals." He chuckled. "I'm Miles. I work with City Hall." My brain screamed. Run. Instead, I smiled. So, you're not here to arrest me for impersonating a dog walker yesterday? On the contrary, he said. We're interested in expanding the city's canine outreach program. Public safety meets companionship. We'd need someone unconventional. I looked at Muffin, who was now rolling in mulch. I looked at Sparky, who had somehow found a chicken nugget. I looked back at Miles. You want me? You're the only person who's lost the mayor's dog, found her again, and didn't file for emotional compensation. I blinked. That's a thing. He didn't answer. Just handed me a business card that read, Deputy Coordinator, Urban Pet Engagement Unit. I stared at it. This was getting out of hand. And I kind of loved it. I walked home that day with muddy shoes, a head full of confusion, and Muffin's drool on my sleeve. The business card from Miles felt both like an invitation and a prank. Urban Pet Engagement Unit? Was that real? Did I just stumble into government-adjacent dog diplomacy? I Googled it the moment I got home. Nothing. I tried the City Hall website. No such department listed. I even reverse image searched the business card. It came up once, in a Reddit thread titled, Weirdest Things Officials Have Handed You. But then, an email. Subject, follow-up from Miles, UPU opportunity. I clicked it like it might explode. We're impressed with your natural instinct under pressure. See, Poodle incident. Would love to discuss further. Tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. meet at the public sculpture shaped like a pretzel. No need to reply, just show up if curious. No signature. Just that. No address, no contact info. Just a pretzel sculpture meeting. I should have ignored it, but I didn't. At 9:28 the next morning, I stood in front of a 20-foot abstract bronze twist that vaguely resembled something edible if you squinted and ignored the rust. Miles was already there. Glad you came, he said, holding 2 lattes. One for him, and somehow correctly, 1 oat milk, half sweet, for me. We like people who follow instinct, especially when it's bizarre. Okay, I said, sipping. What is this job? And are there uniforms? He grinned. No uniforms. Yet. Think of it like urban intervention. You'll get calls when dogs cause chaos. You de-escalate. Like a canine SWAT team? Less guns. More treats. I blinked. And this is sanctioned? He shrugged. It's tolerated. He handed me a small device. It looked like a pager, and a Tamagotchi had a weird baby. On it, a single button labeled, woof. When that buzzes, Miles said, you're up. Up for what exactly? Before he could answer, it buzzed. Hard. And a robotic voice from inside the device barked, loose labradoodle. Location, library. Miles just grinned. Guess it's time for your first shift. And that's when I realized. This was way more than a dog walking gig. It was a mission. 5 minutes later, I was sprinting up the marble steps of the downtown public library, clutching the woof device like it might offer guidance or at least GPS spoiler. It did neither. It only buzzed louder the closer I got to the building, like a smug game of canine hot and cold. I burst through the front doors and was immediately met with chaos. A golden blur shot past the front desk, trailed by a librarian waving a copy of War and Peace and shouting, "No dogs and nonfiction." People were shrieking. Children were cheering. A man in the poetry section was inexplicably filming a vlog. Somewhere, a woman yelled, "He just licked a first edition." I caught a glimpse of the dog, curly, frantic, wearing a sparkly collar that said, Waffles. It was mid-skid on the polished floor, trying to round a corner near the card catalog with all the grace of a furry bowling ball. I took off after him. Waffles was quick, but I was motivated by embarrassment, caffeine, and the bizarre fact that I now technically worked for a shadowy dog control unit the government denied existed. We looped past the graphic novels, through periodicals, past a man asleep under a pile of newspapers who mumbled, "This is how the wolves return." Then Waffles bolted down a hallway marked staff only. I followed without thinking and crashed straight into a cart of audiobooks. Titles flew. Discs rolled. Waffles barked in what I can only describe as joyful defiance. Then silence. I tiptoed forward and found him sitting in the break room, calmly chewing on a granola bar someone had left on the table. We stared at each other. Me, panting. Him, smug. I reached into my belt bag, pulled out the emergency peanut butter chew, and slowly extended it like I was negotiating a hostage release. Waffles sniffed, paused, then took the chew, tail wagging. Mission accomplished. As I carried him out, past scattered books and one man clapping slowly, I felt my woof device vibrate again. This time, the robotic voice simply said, "Good boy." I didn't know if it meant me or the dog. Either way, I was weirdly proud and mildly concerned that I now worked for the Illuminati of pet emergencies. Later that afternoon, I returned to my apartment carrying a tired labradoodle, a stack of library fines I technically owed, and a growing suspicion that I had fallen into the most absurd undercover job of all time. The moment I stepped inside, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Riley. "You're on the news." Grimacing face. I froze. Sure enough, I opened the link and there I was, caught on security footage, half buried under audiobooks, sprinting after waffles in full action hero mode. The caption? "Local man stops dog from destroying archives. Hero or hazard?" I wasn't sure whether to be flattered or concerned. Then the Wolf device buzzed again. But this time, the robotic voice was different. "Report to headquarters. Code Biscuit Plus." This is not a drill. Before I could even panic, an address appeared on the tiny screen. An address I knew, because it was 1 block from City Hall. I stuffed Waffles into a blanket cocoon. He was asleep, snoring softly, left a note for Riley, and jogged the 2 blocks to a nondescript door tucked between a cupcake shop and a key copy kiosk. I buzzed. The door opened automatically. Inside, white walls, silent halls, and a sign that read, "Urban Pet Engagement Unit, Dispatch Ops." A man in a hoodie waved me in. "You're late. The Pomeranian's already in the ventilation system." "What?" "Come on," he said, handing me a headset. "It's tiny, it's angry, and it knows how to chew wires." I followed him into a small control room, where a giant screen displayed infrared footage of a building duct system. Sure enough, there was a glowing dot labeled Fluffy darting through the vents like a furry heat-seeking missile. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you're the only person Fluffy responds to. You shared a bench with her last week. You fed her pretzels." My jaw dropped. "Wait, that's her?" "Yep," he said, slapping a granola bar into my hand. "Your bond was noted. You're her designated neutralizer." I stood there, headset on, snack in hand, watching as a tiny ball of chaos skittered toward the electrical hub of the city's central building. And all I could think was, I used to just sit in parks. Now I defuse Pomeranians. I was led through a narrow stairwell, past 2 confused janitors and what I swear was a retired magician, until we reached a hatch in the ceiling marked with faded tape that read, "Authorized Fluffy entry only." My guide, whose name, I later learned, was Ed, and whose job title was Containment Strategist, handed me a flashlight and said, "Good luck. And don't make eye contact." She interprets that as emotional aggression. Then he hoisted me up. I found myself crawling through ductwork, feeling like a firefighter and an idiot at the same time. The granola bar was jammed in my hoodie pocket like a peace offering. My Wolf device buzzed softly every few seconds with directions. Left turn in 3 feet. Fluffy approaching at 9 o'clock. Brace. And then I saw her. A puffball of cinnamon-colored rage. Tiny. Determined. Wearing what I can only describe as a sequined harness that read, "I'm the boss." She spotted me. Stopped. Narrowed her eyes. I froze. She growled. Very softly. I slowly, ever so slowly, reached for the granola bar. I broke off a corner. Extended it. "Hi, Fluffy," I whispered like I was defusing a bomb. "Remember the pretzels?" "Good times." She tilted her head, sniffed, and then, to my astonishment, trotted toward me, tail wagging slightly, and snatched the snack from my hand. Crisis averted. Until the duct floor beneath us gave a loud groan. We both looked down. "I think this is..." Clang. We dropped through the ceiling and landed with a very dramatic crash, right in the middle of a city council meeting. Silence. I lay on the conference table, winded. Fluffy was proudly perched on my chest, tail wagging like she'd just delivered a TED Talk. Council members stared. One woman clapped once, very slowly. The mayor, sipping tea at the head of the table, raised an eyebrow and said, "I see we've upgraded delivery services." I opened my mouth to speak. Nothing came out. Fluffy barked once. Triumphant. The mayor nodded. Promotion granted. I had no idea what he meant. But suddenly, everyone was applauding. And Fluffy licked my face like we were running for office together. After the council chamber performance, crash, things escalated quickly. I was ushered out a side door by a woman wearing aviator sunglasses indoors who simply said, "Protocol, debrief, and donut." Next thing I knew, I was seated at a tiny desk in a windowless room with a bare claw in one hand and a stack of legal documents in the other. At the top, Urban Pet Engagement Unit, Level 2 Operative Agreement. I didn't even know I was Level 1, I muttered. The woman nodded without looking up. "You were unofficial. Now you're officially unofficial. Does that mean I get, like, a badge?" She handed me a sticker. It was shaped like a bone. In Comic Sans, it read, "Dog duty, don't mess it up." I stuck it on my belt bag. Naturally, after a brief orientation video that featured cartoon poodles and a squirrel dubbed Agent Nutty, I was handed a new Wolf device. sleeker, with more buttons. Congratulations, said the sunglasses woman. You're now certified for solo retrieval, rapid response, and fur-related diplomacy. Fur-related what now? She slid a photo across the table. It showed a cat, sitting on a velvet pillow, wearing what appeared to be a crown. Your next mission, she said deadpan. Princess Pickles. I thought this was a dog unit. We're expanding, she said. The cat lobbies got involved. I stared at the photo. The cat stared back, through the camera, into my soul. She's been stolen, the woman said. From a birthday party. Suspect is a rival cat named Biscotti. They have history. I blinked. You want me to retrieve a kidnapped cat princess from an ex-boyfriend? She stood, adjusted her sunglasses, and said, exactly. And we're something nice. There might be press. I walked out of the room in a daze, sticker badge crooked on my hip, wondering if I was awake or trapped in the weirdest fever dream ever. Then the new wolf buzzed and purred. Princess location confirmed. Yarn shop. Enter with caution. I sighed. I was in too deep. And also, I had no idea how to deal with emotionally volatile cats. The yarn shop was charming in the way that made you suspicious. Too tidy. Too cozy. A place where people with mysterious pasts come to drink herbal tea and never speak of their crimes. I pushed open the door, and a little bell jingled, a pure, innocent sound that did not match the chaos I knew was brewing inside. There, nestled between skeins of lavender merino and ethically sourced alpaca, was Biscotti, a Maine Coon, massive, regal, unapologetically smug. And beside him, Princess Pickles, wearing a tiny tiara that had clearly been duct-taped on during a struggle. Two shopkeepers were frozen in place behind the counter, clearly unsure whether this was a real emergency or some sort of avant-garde performance art. I held up my sticker badge. Urban Pet Retrieval. I'm here for the princess. Biscotti hissed. Princess Pickles meowed, long, dramatic, and with the exact energy of a soap opera confession. I took a step forward. Biscotti stood. This cat was the size of a medium raccoon and clearly not afraid to throw down. I slowly reached into my belt bag. Not for a weapon. For salmon treats. Let's not escalate, I said gently. There's enough drama in the feline community already. Pickles blinked at me. Biscotti licked his paw like he couldn't be bothered. Then, suddenly, he leapt directly onto my shoulder. I flailed, flinched, and spun in a half circle, which only resulted in me getting wrapped in yarn like a poorly written action scene. Princess Pickles used the distraction to sprint to the door. She paused dramatically, meowed once more, probably saying something sassy, and exited with a dignity that only cats in tiny crowns can manage. I was left tangled like a lasagna noodle. Biscotti perched on a shelf, purring smugly. The shopkeeper handed me scissors. You know, she said, this happens more often than you'd think. When I finally got free and returned Pickles to her handler, a child dressed as Marie Antoinette, I was given a handwritten thank you note and a coupon for 20% off catnip candles. Later that night, my wolf device buzzed with a new message. Outstanding diplomacy. You've been cleared for elite assignments. I stared at the screen. What was elite? What came after cats and crowns? I'd soon find out. And I was not ready. My final mission came in at 6:03 a.m., a time of day previously reserved for ignoring alarm clocks and questioning my life choices. The wolf device lit up in urgent red, blinking a message I had never seen before. High-level escalation. Operation Double Biscuit. Report to City Hall Rooftop. City Hall Rooftop? I arrived bleary-eyed, carrying a travel mug of coffee and one unmatched sock. Atop the building stood Miles, the mayor, and a large golden retriever wearing aviation goggles. This, Miles said solemnly, is Commander Waffles. I thought Waffles was the Labradoodle? I asked. Miles shook his head. There are multiple Waffles. This one's in charge of air strategy. The mayor turned to me. We need you. A critical mission has gone sideways. The annual pet parade has been overtaken by rogue squirrels. We need a handler on the ground. Squirrels. Trained. Possibly unionized. They've hijacked the float carrying the city's beloved guinea pig, Sir Chubbs. I blinked. I'm sorry. What now? Commander Waffles barked. A drone dropped a backpack into my arms. Inside, a harness, earbud, kibble pouch, and a tiny flag with a paw on it. You'll rappel from the roof, Miles said, handing me gloves. Land on the float. Secure Sir Chubbs. Deliver him to the Grand Marshal's podium before the final kazoo salute. I opened my mouth to protest, and then they strapped me in. 2 minutes later, I was dangling over Main Street, midair, descending toward a float shaped like a dog bone and covered in frantic squirrels. I landed with all the grace of a potato. One squirrel squeaked in outrage and threw a peanut at my head. But I found Sir Chubbs tiny, fluffy, and surprisingly serene in the face of rodent mutiny. I scooped him up, waved the flag, and shouted, "Pet unit, stand down." The squirrels froze. And then, scattered. Miles later told me they were actors from an off-Broadway production of Squirrelicious and had gotten carried away. But in that moment, I was a hero. Sir Chubbs was safe. The kazoo salute sounded. The city cheered. And I, former pretzel snacker and accidental dog walker, had completed my final mission. As I walked back through confetti and barking fans, the wolf device gave one last buzz. Position: retired. Status: legend. I sighed, smiling, and finally went back to just sitting on park benches. Until a woman ran up to me, handed me a leash, and said, "Can you hold Mr. Pickles for just a second?" I looked down. The cat winked. And I knew. I was back in